Okay, welcome everyone. This is Joyce Sacco with the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on progress being made in implementing the State Department of Human Services Housing Strategy. Before we get started, I want to provide you with logistical information. Please make sure you get online while our presenters talk so you can access the visual component of this presentation. You should have received an email from me yesterday and again today. We will be recording today's webinar, so we'll send that out as well. First, click the Ready Talk link, enter your name, email address, and click Register, and you will be given access to the meeting. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in using the chat feature in the lower left-hand screen, and we will open up the line for discussion at the end of the webinar and make sure all the questions that are asked are addressed. And again, we'll be sending out the PowerPoint presentation along with the recording after today's webinar. It's my pleasure today to introduce our two presenters. First, we have Ben Loudermilk. He was recently appointed to the position of Executive Housing Director at the Department of Human Services. Ben, a longtime friend of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, he believes that many Pennsylvanians living in facilities facing homelessness or are unable to afford their rent. Ben oversees the implementation of the department's 5-year housing strategy. The strategy's goal is to leverage internal and external resources and to collaborate with all levels of government to make housing resources more accessible and available. This will help to connect Pennsylvanians with housing opportunities, expand affordable housing options, and partner with local agencies and pool resources. Prior to his appointment, Ben served as the Executive Director of the Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities and has more than 20 years of experience with community-based organizations. Much of Ben's work has centered on local and regional planning initiatives and the development of a robust housing plan, as well as the development of low-income housing tax credit projects and other community and economic development initiatives. He has also worked on several homeless initiatives across the country to develop housing and other opportunities for greater consumer self-sufficiency and economic growth. Also joining us today is Jonathan McVeigh. He serves as the department's Executive Housing Coordinator. In this role, John works closely with staff within DHS and other agencies to implement the DHS 5-year strategy and is responsible for a number of key housing initiatives, including Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Demonstration, a TANF Rapid Rehousing Demonstration, and strengthening Medicaid housing-related services and supports work group. It's our pleasure to have both gentlemen with us today and for the Housing Alliance to continue the work to push the issue of affordable housing forward. So welcome, Ben.
Oh, thank you so much, Joyce. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many familiar names in the participant list. A lot of participants, well over 300. It's great. I'd like to thank you for joining us for our second DHS housing call hosted by the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. I'd really like to thank the Housing Alliance for making this possible. As Joyce mentioned, my name is Ben Loudermilk, and I'm the Executive Housing Director for the department. I'm joined by Jonathan McVeigh, who will be speaking with you in a moment about our IT enhancement that we're calling PA-PAIR. PAIR stands for Pre-Screening, Assessment, Intake, and Referral. More on that later. And please forgive me as I grapple with this technology. Our PA-PAIR is easier to use than webinar technology, apparently, so we'll see how this goes. All right, there we are. PA-PAIR is really about removing some of the barriers to applying for housing opportunities for persons in institutions, those at risk of being institutionalized, and for other DHS consumers who struggle with connecting to housing opportunities. You may recall this graphic from the housing strategy, but we're really doing number one there, removing the barriers, and number two, connecting people with housing opportunities. But you see the handshake? We need to partner with local agencies. You folks, we're hoping, will use this system to access not only 811 but other housing opportunities in the future. You may recall that we had a strategy related to expanding access and creating new, affordable, integrated, and supportive housing opportunities. The first goal under there I kept on here because this is what our first IT enhancement is about. It's about our partnership with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to implement the HUD Section 811 project rental assistance for individuals who are low income with disabilities aged 18 to 61. As part of this program, PHFA has assisted us in partnership with deploying a software solution to aid us with the referral process. I direct your attention to the third goal under the first strategy. This software is one of the tools referenced in Strategy 1 Goal 3 to provide tools to designated lead county-based agencies through IT enhancements. And again, this is something that we're doing under in the future under Money Follows the Person. A little more on that later. So to put that in context, I wanted to make sure you're all familiar with the 811 program. So just a little refresher. It's a project-based rental assistance subsidy for persons with extremely low incomes and disabilities. It's implemented as a partnership between PHFA and DHS to increase access to affordable, integrated, and accessible housing, and we have funding for over 400 units. We've conducted a number of presentations related to 811. John and Kristen Nagel, who I think may be on the call, do a far better job in explaining the 811 program as it works today than I do. So feel free to contact us after the presentation if you have particular questions about the 811 program. You should understand the flow. So it's important to understand the way the IT enhancement attempts to address the needs of the 811 program. So 811 applicants, the people that are in the multicolors up above, flow through the local lead agency regional housing coordinator box. That box is what we're talking about here today. So that's the front end, and our goal is to have the ability for service providers to build the pool of available applicants. Today for 811, in the future for other housing opportunities. The other box on the other side shows buildings, properties with vacancies, notify network through social serve. That's another IT enhancement, and it's something that's similar to pahousingsearch.com, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's the way properties who have agreed to do the 811 program access the system. So the way this flows is once somebody's entered into the system, the individual then is referred to a property, visits the unit, and submits an application if they're interested. The owner screens the applicant as they normally would. Many of these buildings, as some of you know, have different screening processes, different applicant requirements. They're very close, but more importantly, each property tends to have its own wait list. So we refer to other housing resources. We either accept or we reject, and we can run through the process again if the application is incomplete. So this is the flow of information as we'll see it. What's not described in the slide is the way that the landlord is able to list a unit in the system and the way that the regional housing coordinator, commonly known as RHC, who function as the waitlist administrator for the system, is able to connect the individual to a unit. Local lead agencies and RHCs have received and will continue to receive training on that, and that's sort of the internal control piece that's a little bit more under the tight control of the state. The case management interface is what we're talking about here today, and it's a very exciting new feature. The IT enhancement for the Section 811 demonstration is the first step towards creating a more universal screening and waitlist management mechanism. Currently, there are 5 counties participating in a soft launch. So we're in the midst of a soft launch. We're looking at a hard launch next week. The soft launch counties are Allegheny, Center, Dauphin, Lancaster, and Philadelphia. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. With the upcoming hard launch, an additional 5 counties will gain access to the system. As additional properties elect to participate in the 811, more counties can be using the system. So again, this is limited, and it's maybe good that it's limited. It gives us a lot of opportunity to test it. The 5 additional counties are Beaver, Chester, Clinton, Franklin, and York. And again, the goal is to get to a point where we're expanding this to all kinds of properties. This screen should be familiar to some of you. So many of you are familiar with pahousingsearch.com. It has been used by many folks like housing authorities. The one I worked at uses it. It was a way for us to list Section 8 landlords and requiring the landlord to do that instead of having a list that's updated by the authorities. There are for and nonprofit housing providers use the system for the express purpose of listing units that are available. Emphasis Social Serve, the developers of PAHousingSearch.com, developed this new module for the Section 811 program, project-based rental assistance. This is the first in a number of IT enhancements, as I mentioned before, planned under the auspices of the Housing Strategy. And I believe today Van Gottel, the CEO, has joined us. Van, are you on the line?
He'll probably have to hit *7 to unmute himself.
Unmute. I see that he's in the list, so we know Van's on the line. Van, if you have a chance, say hello. But Van could answer some questions if you have them of a technical nature. Hey, Van. How you doing?
Thanks for inviting me to today's call.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So Van understands the system inside and out and can answer some questions if they're too technical. But thank you, Van. By the way, PHFA contracted with Emphasis Social Serve for this deployment. We plan to use another source of funding that some of you may have heard of called Money Follows the Person to deploy the next phase. And we keep bringing it up, but we want to make sure you understand that's an enhancement to connect eligible consumers to deeply affordable units, also known as 20% AMI units, area median income. Many of these units also have features for folks with mobility, hearing, and/or vision impairment. We anticipate that launch will happen later this fall. We're still working with Van and PHFA on some of the details. In the long term, though, the dream is to have a system that offers a menu of options that match the criteria entered into the front end, into this front end, matching people with a number of different options. And so, without further delay, I introduce John McVeigh to cover the way the system works. John?
Thank you, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. What you'll see here on your screen now is the online portal, the front page essentially to the portal, the Social Serve system. And at the top in the red circle is the login. So once you click that, what you will see is this login screen. And at this point, I just want to take a moment to get into a little bit of the details on the way the system works. So there are essentially 3 user roles that an individual will be assigned, depending on who they are and what they're supposed to do for the system. There's the property manager who will log in, enter the property information into the system. And from their perspective, this should be pretty smooth sailing because, as Ben mentioned, the system is based off of the existing PAHousingSearch.com. So property managers who are already familiar with the system will have no trouble at all familiarizing themselves and entering their information in the system. And those that aren't familiar with it, it's a relatively straightforward, logical process. It's pretty simple information that they're entering into it. So in addition to that, the property managers will, Social Serve will be conducting proactive polling, which essentially is Social Serve contacting property managers on a regular basis, I think monthly, to make sure that the system has updated property information. That way we're not relying entirely on the property managers to constantly update their information because we know how busy they are and how difficult it can be to maintain information. So that's a way to kind of bypass that and help them out a little bit. So that's the first user role. The second user role is case manager. Now, a case manager will consist of service providers and local lead agencies. So the service providers are effectively the referral sources for the applicant. This is where the applicants currently are living or are connected, whatever system they may be connected to, whether it's a homeless shelter, a nursing home, a congregate care facility, thing of that nature. And the third user role is the waitlist admin. Now, the way the system's built and the way our processes are built, it will be the regional housing coordinators that have that user role assigned to them. And so the reason why I'm talking about this at this moment is when you log in, that's the license that you have. Those are the functions that you have when you log into the system. So each user role serves a different purpose in the system, and I'm not going to go any further into those different roles. A little bit too detailed for this presentation today. So the next screen is once you log in, you'll see this selection here. On the left you can see PA waitlist reports, Save Search, Waitlist Manager, and the PA HUD 811 Project Rental Assistance. So when you click on that, that'll take you into this system. But before I do that, I just want to mention, remind folks that, as Ben mentioned, that we're looking to build another source of housing into this system, those 20% units. So right here you're only seeing 811, but in the future you may see another bullet that says 20% AMI units. And ultimately the dream is to connect all kinds of housing, HUD multifamily, VASH, public housing, homeless programs, etc. So once you select PA HUD 811 Project Rental Assistance, you'll jump in, and this isn't the first screen you'll see, but for the purposes of the demonstration we've jumped straight to the pre-screen. What you would normally see is the wait list, and then at the top, if you see where the Pennsylvania banner is, there's a wait list tab, a help tab, a pre-screen applicant, and a feedback tab. What's happened is we've clicked on the pre-screen tab, pre-screen applicant tab, and that's the screen you're looking at now. Now, just as kind of a logistical formatting note here, for the purposes of this presentation, we are not able to view an entire web page on one slide. So what would happen here is what you're seeing is the top of the web page, and if you scroll down, you would see the additional information that we'll be covering in the next couple slides. And this will be a recurring theme through the rest of the presentation, is that the web pages are divided among multiple slides. So the pre-screening application page here immediately jumps into the core eligibility criteria for the 811 program, which consists of age, income, disability, Medicaid, long-term services and supports, and criminal background. So the next slide should be the counties. Okay, so if you scroll down on the pre-screen page, this is what you'll see. The 67 counties in Pennsylvania that an applicant can select from. Now this information is paired with the income information that the case manager entered with HUD area median income data to determine if the applicant is below the income threshold. So each county, each area is going to have a different area median income. Philadelphia is going to be very different from McKean County. And so there are different income levels for that. And this is the first level of screening on income. The next slide, again, still on the pre-screen slide, pre-screen page, the case manager will now identify what setting the applicant is currently living in. This information is used later to identify which priority population the applicant belongs to, and that information is used to put them on the wait list in the order that they were. So there's the priority population, and then there's the date and time that the application was received. And just as a quick refresher, if you aren't already familiar with it or just don't remember, the three priority populations are for adults with autism, intellectual and physical disabilities, serious mental illnesses, and transitional age youth. So within those groups of disabilities, there are three priority populations. At the top, people who are institutionalized but are able to live in the community in permanent supportive housing. Those folks are placed at the top of the waiting list automatically by the system. Priority 2 are at risk of institutionalization with no permanent supportive housing. And I just want to note that this does include people who are experiencing homelessness. And priority 3 are congregate care settings and people who and the folks that desire to live in the community. So we have now the next couple slides will be covering kind of the different scenarios that may happen if information is either entered incorrectly or the information indicates the person is ineligible. So this scenario that you're seeing here, PA HUD 811 PRA, applicant must be under the age of 62 at the time of lease. This is just a warning. It's not saying the person's ineligible. It's just saying that the person was maybe 61 years old and they're at that borderline. So what will happen is they will still be eligible. They'll be placed on the wait list according to the priority population and the date and time they submitted their application. And if they turn 62 while they're still on the wait list, unfortunately then they will be ineligible for the program. However, if they sign a lease, if they're on the wait list and they're able to be referred to a vacant unit and they sign the lease before they turn 62, then they can continue with that 811 rental assistance until it's no longer needed or until they move on and to another apartment. This next slide is showing what happens when a person is actually outside of the eligibility criteria for age. So the person has to be 18 to 61. This make a mistake, change your answers link here allows you to go back and maybe you entered the wrong year and have to go back and correct it. The next slide here is going to show that the applicant does not meet any of the income requirements for any of those counties that were selected. So if you see at the bottom of that little window, it says Adams, Franklin, and York. And the income amount that was entered is not eligible for any of those locations. So the case manager can go back and change, maybe correct the income amount, or talk to the applicant and say, look, you're not eligible for those, or there are other areas where you might want to consider living. Is there somewhere else that may be a possibility? Again, this is information that is determined based on HUD, area median income data, and the county the applicant selected, as well as the income amount that was entered into the system. So as with any federally assisted program, there are criminal background requirements, and the system also checks for that. So if an applicant has been convicted of meth production on a federally assisted property, or the applicant is a lifetime registered sex offender, they are prohibited from participating in this program. And the system obviously catches that. So now we move on to, we've moved beyond the pre-screen, and now we see the counties listed, Adams, Franklin, and York, and the applicant is able to move, the case manager is able to move the applicant through the application process. Now what you're seeing here is there's also the possibility that an applicant is eligible for some counties and ineligible in other counties. So it's not an all or nothing scenario. Here you can see at the top of that window the applicant is eligible for Adams, Franklin, Fulton, Greene, Somerset, and York, but not eligible for Forest or Snyder at the bottom. Now that the pre-screen page is complete, the rest of the application's 3 pages can be finished. If you look at the top where the red circle is, you'll see Edit Personal. Right now we're looking at the top of the personal data screen in the system, and to the right of the red circle is Edit Housing and Edit Income and Household. So those are the 3 pages of the rest of the application that we'll be walking through here. And you'll notice that the information from the pre-screen page that was collected is already pre-populated here. So the date of birth, the Medicaid number, and some other items can be collected as well. And that'll be continuous through the rest of these 3 pages. So these data points that you're seeing here and on the next couple pages are also collected. They're partially functional in the sense of determining eligibility, determining what the applicant's needs are, what they want, but they're also HUD required reporting elements. So if you recall, back on the kind of home screen after you've logged in, there was that waitlist report. So if I were to have clicked on that, it would have generated the reports that HUD requires for this program. So again, collecting the personal contact information, identifying the referral agent, contact information, and the type of agency is all collected here on these pages. Now we're on to the edit housing. Again, reaffirming that the applicant is in a nursing facility. And again, some of this information is automatically generated from the pre-screen page. Now this information is collected here. So you'll see needs physically accessible housing, hearing impairment, vision impairment, stepless ramped or flat entry, a live-in aid. It identifies the unit size that's needed. And then also there's a little text box there that allows the case manager to enter any additional information that may be helpful in helping to match a unit, an applicant with a unit. Now if I were to just hit submit without entering any of that information into the system, this is what will happen. The system automatically obviously catches it and says you need to answer these questions. Just a nice additional piece of functionality. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so again, continuing through the rest of the application page. The initial pre-screen page identified the counties that the applicant is interested in, and they were able to select any counties that they wanted to. However, at this point, they have to choose 3 of their top choices. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that the applicant's carefully considering where they want to live, and not just selecting counties, all of the counties, to increase their chance of finding something. This is also an issue of manageability for the program. If an applicant was selecting all 67 counties, managing the referral process to and from a property manager and updating their information would be difficult, if not impossible, to manage that process. So I will note that the applicants also have the ability at any point to come back into the system. I should say not the applicants, the case managers have the ability to come in and update the information at any point. So if the applicant chooses to live elsewhere, they can certainly change their counties at any point and select from any of the 67 counties. This next screen is showing kind of towards the end of the application the various sources of income that an applicant may have, and it identifies the amount that they're receiving. Again, just confirming what their income is and where they're receiving it from, and the amounts to ensure program eligibility. And now we're at the very end of the application process. So if you were to click submit here, that will take us to, we're now eligible. We have a case file actually in the system, and Jane Doe is eligible. The 2 red circles that you see on your screen, I'm going to start at the top, small one. You'll see change log. And that change log is what you're seeing at the bottom, those list of things, the statuses and the description of the changes that were made and who it was made by. This is really important. This is essentially the case notes for the applicant, for this specific applicant. And the case manager and the waitlist admin have the ability to update the information in the system. And the system updates information on the change log itself, but the waitlist admin and the case manager also have the ability to manually enter their own case notes. So perhaps they recently had contact with the applicant through the case manager, and they had recently visited a unit, and there was just something about it they didn't like, and so they're just making a note of that in the case notes. So I just wanted to show that additional functionality is very important to this program. So once the application is complete, this is what the case file actually looks like. So this is all of the information that was just collected through those questions, those 3 pages. And I want to note there, the red circle at the top, the edit function. At any point in time, the case manager and waitlist admin can go into the system and update an applicant's information. Perhaps they've changed their address. Perhaps they have change the number of rooms that they're requesting, and maybe they need a 2-bedroom because they're going to have a live-in aid now. Things like that. This next slide is showing the income. Now, when we originally entered the information in the system, we said the person had a yearly income of $12,000. The red circle there at the bottom is showing we've just updated it to $13,000. So again, just showing that functionality that you can go in and update the information as it's needed, ensuring eligibility for the program, but also ensuring that the applicant is getting the necessary amenities that they're requesting. So the system automatically checks, and in this scenario, what we've done is updated the applicant's income to $27,000 as opposed to $12,000 or $13,000. And so automatically the system says, it gives you a warning. It says, if you do this, the person is now going to be ineligible. So it requires you to either accept the changes or cancel the changes. And then of course you can go back and maybe change the counties and perhaps change that around. Now, $27,000 is a little bit higher amount, so that may, depending on where you select, may or may not be within the income threshold for 811. So I'm going to hand it off to Ben now, and thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to mention that my first time navigating this system was really during the creation of the screenshots for this PowerPoint presentation. I found that the system was pretty intuitive and guided me through the process with prompts and error messages, some of which I captured. So I want to point out that it has a lot of the same functionality of the PAHousingSearch.com, which I think we found pretty easy to implement in the local arena. If you provide services in one of these counties, Allegheny, Center, Dauphin, Lancaster, Philadelphia, or moving forward Beaver, Chester, Clinton, Franklin, and York, you can find out who your local lead agency is in that link that we've provided here. We're going to get this document up on our website as well to make it easier for you to, right now you have to go to PHFA's website to secure the local lead agency list. And Joyce, I think, will help us out by forwarding out the link to all webinar participants. Again, new counties are coming online. Shout out to Kristen Nagel and PHFA, who have done a great job over the last 6 or 8 months in identifying properties. It's kind of hard to do because there are not a whole lot of incentives for existing properties who are eligible for this program, and so they're doing it because they believe in the cause or they want to help out PHFA or the Department of Human Services, but a lot of great work happening there. I also wanted to give you an update. You may recall that we're committed to reporting to you on a regular basis about the status of the housing strategy. In addition to our statewide tour, we've met many of you. We have more of you to meet yet and discuss housing. We're providing you with some updates since our last webinar, which was in July. As some of you may have heard, the National Housing Trust Fund is capitalized at $3.8 million this year. And I think the big surprise, the one I'm very excited about, is the new State Affordable Housing Trust Fund based on the Realty Transfer Tax, also known as the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Fund, or FAIR, is capitalized at $12.67 million this year. PHFA will be overseeing that process. And again, that's our strategy one, to expand access and create new affordable, integrated, and supportive housing opportunities. Our goal 4 is to explore new and expanded funding opportunities to increase the supply of affordable, integrated, and supportive housing. I've mentioned what PHFA has done. You'll recall that we really lobbied for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars last year. It's a great thing that's happened. But on the DHS side, we're still waiting on final agreements with the managed care organizations. As you may recall during the last webinar, or if you've spoken to me since then, we look forward to exploring opportunities to innovate around the production of housing for our core constituents. There's a lot of energy here. The problem is it's a little bit, there's some timing issues right now with the new managed care agreements. We also wanted to report out on the strategy number 2 to strengthen and expand housing and housing-related services and supports. This is another area of great excitement, in particular to maximize Medicaid funding for housing-related services and supports. We've completed the initial crosswalk, and some of you may recall that the Pennsylvania Health Access Network, in cooperation with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, created a crosswalk that focused in on persons with behavioral health disabilities that may be experiencing homelessness. That crosswalk really pushed us, and we worked in partnership with Patrick Keenan at FAN and with the Housing Alliance. We're in the process right now of drafting high-level department-wide definitions for housing-related services and supports, and these services are divided between pre-tenancy and tenancy sustaining. So we want to work on connecting people to the units. We also want to work on tenancy sustaining, and we want to use Medicaid dollars to pay for it. We've received feedback with regard to some of our initial draft language, and we're in the process of finalizing service definitions based on that feedback. So once we have draft housing service definitions, we intend to seek key stakeholder feedback. Just a side note, Secretary Dallas and I met with Patrick Keenan of FAN and Monica Medina McDury of Project Home. It was a great meeting of the minds, and we committed to working very closely with stakeholders on this issue. We want your input on this. I also wanted to mention that FAN just released their business case for the use of Medicaid dollars for housing supports and services. Check it out if you get the chance. I don't have the link up on the site, but things are moving along. I just want to make sure you guys are aware that this is moving along and it's very important to the department. The other update we wanted to provide to you was on strategy number 3, to assess new and existing programs and determine future needs and measure outcomes. We want, under Goal 1, to assess and improve existing DHS housing-related programs. Broadly speaking, we're currently doing an inventory on all housing and housing-related supports and services provided through the department. It's somewhat of a unique process, as many of these services are not necessarily broken out to reflect expenditures on housing. Our hope is that this will help us to better understand what we're spending and how we might use that funding more efficiently and effectively. And a good example of that is the TANF Rapid Rehousing Demonstration that's happening in Philadelphia right now, where we just got the second quarterly report in our emails today. We're going to be taking a look at the successes of that program, but we want to implement other kinds of demonstrations and try to figure out what the best practices are related to housing and housing supports and services. Thank you for bearing with me as I go through these screens. Strategy number 4, to promote teamwork and communication with state and local government and to develop housing opportunities for all populations served by DHS. That's what the IT enhancement PA pair is about. We really we need buy-in from the local level. The Department of Human Services, all the program offices are committed to housing. We're talking about housing as a social determinant of health in ways we haven't in the past. It's an exciting time. If you talk to Brian Hudson at PHFA, he'll tell you that he's never seen the kind of cooperation between departments. But we're also hearing from the Department of Corrections and Aging, DDAP, many other agencies across the state, and a lot of localities who are interested in this issue. And it's a kind of awakening, the realization that we can actually serve people in a community setting. But goal number 4 here, to provide ongoing communication to stakeholders and advocates on the progress of the DHS housing strategy, is what we're doing here today. We've completed, excuse me, I didn't click my, currently we're looking at a number of exciting milestones in front of us in the coming months. We're really looking forward to reporting out to you again during our next webinar. Housing Alliance has graciously provided us this space to do this. Again, I'd like to thank you for participating in this process and for implementing the housing strategy, and for joining us today in particular to hear about the new IT enhancement we're calling PA Pair. Many of you have probably already read the 5-year housing strategy. We are looking to overhaul the website, so you want to keep an eye out for this. But just a reminder that you can find the housing strategy, our companion video, And we will soon be posting the list of local lead agencies at dhs.pa.gov. Right now you can just go right to our front page, and housing is one of the hot topics. The other thing I wanted to discuss with you, if you are a property owner or manager, this is a great opportunity for you and Pennsylvania's most vulnerable citizens. For more information about becoming an 811 property, please visit PHFA's website. You can also give John or Ben a call, and I haven't asked Kristen, but I'm sure she would take a call from you as well. We don't want to flood her with phone calls. We've done a serious outreach, and we think we've contacted many property owners who are interested at this point in time. For more information about the housing strategy, you can reach out to either me or John. And again, here's our contact information, and that should be forwarded to you after the webinar. So at this point, we would entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, Ben and John. We really appreciate that. We do have a couple of questions from Linda Hill. When will other communities be able to participate in the 811 search?
Well, the issue there, and this is some of the complexity of the 811 program, but properties have to be first identified and agree to participate in the program. Some of you have heard me mention that when I worked in Cumberland County, I was waiting for the call for 811. And a process had occurred where they reviewed the portfolio of properties in Cumberland County, and some of the interesting things about this are properties can only serve 25% or identified 25% of the units for persons with disabilities. Any number of persons with disabilities can live in the units, but designated units cannot be more than 25%. A lot of mission-driven properties already have that number, 25% of their units or more dedicated to persons with disabilities. So they would be ineligible for the 811 subsidy. The other piece of this puzzle, and I'm sure I'm going to miss something, John, chime in if you need to, there are some software requirements. And the irony of this is the software requirements are required by HUD. I think HUD was interested in maybe not doing those requirements, but they needed to do that for the purposes of reporting back to Congress on the success of the program. So these software enhancements for existing properties, a lot of times they're already serving, they already have subsidies. So housing authorities tend to have these software products. And then HUD multifamily, they already have a subsidy, they have these products. But a low-income housing tax credit property may not have these different software capacities, and so they would struggle with investing in that because this should be a budget neutral venture for them. If they participate in 811, they're making units more deeply affordable. They're not really seeing any return on that. They're serving people at lower incomes and persons with disabilities. So the problem is you have to identify the right property complement, and then even after you've identified it, the property management company or owner may not feel the need to do this program. So the ideal way of doing it, and the way PHFA is doing it now, is that new projects that are coming on board are electing this, and they'll be built. 811 will be built into some of the new projects that are coming out in the coming years. So as new projects are identified, we will reach out to the local lead agencies, make them aware of the properties that are becoming available, and Kristen, as I mentioned, has done a great job at doing that outreach. So we don't want to restrict anybody from accessing, but it's sort of the nature of where the properties are being secured right now.
Thank you, Ben. Linda, to unmute yourself, you can do *7 if you have a follow-up comment or question. Again, it's *7. Ben and John, we do have a couple of questions for folks around people working with folks who have criminal backgrounds on this site. Have you had any positive results on finding someone with felony housing?
Well, thank you, Joyce. The program has only been, it's been running for a little while, but we haven't encountered someone with a criminal background that I'm aware of at this point yet, so we don't have much experience with that. I will say that, so there's the HUD limitations that I mentioned during the presentation, But then there's also the tenant selection plans for each property, and those can vary from location to location. But we are looking at alternative solutions. So if the applicant identifies that when they go to apply, yes, I do have a background. It's not one of these two major HUD prohibitions. Is there anything I can do about it? We're looking at ways we can connect them to local organizations. A lot of times law schools will have clinics set up that maybe do criminal background or criminal expungements. And I think bar associations do the same thing. So, and I know that there's a limitation on expungement, but that is one solution we're looking at to help address those types of issues.
We also, thank you, have a question from Kenneth Tong. Are the properties on the 811 just individual apartments, or does this also include bigger complexes?
It is actually a range. I think they're mostly larger developments. There's a floor and a ceiling. So the floor is the property has to have a minimum of 5 units. So it could be a relatively small apartment building with only 5 or 6, I guess the minimum is 5 apartments in it. But they could be much larger, and I think some of them are larger developments.
Thank you. We do have a question too from Amy, and I'm going to not say your last name right, so sorry about that. When you use the term institutionalized, does current placement in a state correctional institution with a diagnosis of mental health issues or autism constitute institutionalized? Also, would an annual income of 0 be correct to enter because at the time of release from the SCI they do not have any form of income such as a job or SSI or SSD?
So those are great questions. The income and then the definition of institutionalized. For the purposes of 811, we are not considering a state correctional or county correctional facility, regardless of a diagnosis, as part of this program. The focus, kind of the history of this program was focusing on the nursing home transitions, diversion, and then also transition out of nursing homes. So that's the background, and a lot of advocacy work was done by those types of organizations, advocates on behalf of people living in nursing homes and who wish to transition out. So at this point in time, no, the state or county correctional facility is not considered institutionalized for the purpose of 811. As for the income question, that actually is a really good question. It doesn't matter. 0 is fine. As long as you're below 30% area median income, and the rent is a fair market rent, which it would be because the property wouldn't get signed on if they didn't have a fair market rent, then the person's fine. So the person will only ever pay up to 30% of their income, so that affordability level.
John, what was our decision making around the state correctional institution?
Well, part of it was the history of the program, the background on why 811 was overhauled, which I forgot to mention during my presentation. We've heard rumor, and I'm way off topic here, but I do want to mention it. We have heard rumors, again, only rumors, that HUD is looking at Section 202, overhauling it in the same way that they've done 811. So just as an aside, I meant to mention that during my presentation, and I forgot. But that is part of the background and part of the rationale for not including state and county correctional facilities, but also in considering people with criminal backgrounds, we are looking at other programs. So if you look in the housing strategy, one of our commitments and one of the goals, I forget exactly which one it is, but we do identify individuals coming out of correctional facilities who have serious mental illnesses or substance use disorders or co-occurring disorders. And there are a couple actual pilots out there right now that are being tested by corrections and probation and parole, and part of which Ben and I have been invited by those organizations, those agencies, to help participate in the planning process. So it came down to the background of the 811 program, what was the original purpose of it, and the idea that we were going to look at other solutions for the meantime, there's a very limited number of resources for 811. So we wanted to really stick at the core of the original intent of the program, which was nursing home, but kind of that broader civil institutional facilities.
Thanks. We have one comment from Jeff Eisman. For your mission statement, is it possible to add in accessible to part of the types of housing stock that you are looking to improve across PA? You mentioned the issue, but having it up front would make a stronger statement.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you had brought this up before. We're still on the first iteration of the housing strategy, and I would be interested in doing that. I do want to think a little bit strategically about what that looks like, not because that isn't a goal, but because we're also we were the three target populations: homeless, folks who are rent burdened, who are extremely low income, and then of course persons with disabilities and institutions that could live in a community-based setting with housing supports. So with those three populations in mind, we just want to make sure that we word it correctly. But I think your advice on that is correct.
Thanks. Additional question we have: should someone have an income that is below the 30% income level, then have an increase while they are placed in an 811 apartment? Would this cause them to not be eligible to stay in the facility and look elsewhere, or are they going only based on the initial reporting from the pre-screening?
So the 30% income level is if the person's still on the wait list and they exceed the 30% income level, then they're no longer eligible for 811. If they're in a unit, then they can stay in the unit. However, their rent will be adjusted accordingly. So they can stay in the 811 unit, but they're not going to be receiving the full subsidy. And I need to check with Kristen on that just to make sure I have that correct. But Kenneth, I would be happy to follow up with you afterwards on that just to make sure I have that correct. I was not anticipating such a detailed question on income.
When referring sex offenders, which types are excluded? I'm sorry.
Isn't that lifetime, John?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sex offenders? Yeah, it's registered lifetime sex offenders that are excluded, prohibited.
Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question, to ask or make a comment? You can do *7 to unmute. It's been very helpful, and again, we don't have a date set for the update in October, but that will be firmed up soon. We'll get that out to folks, and we're really pleased that the Homes Within Reach conference this year, Secretary Dallas will be speaking about the housing strategy at lunch. It's November 14th, and Ben will also be participating in a couple sessions as we continue to break down silos and talk about these very important issues. I think someone unmuted. Does someone have a comment or a question?
Yes. My name is Doris Thomas, and I'm calling about going to some of these banks who have commercial property where they may have 4 or 5 or even 10 units. What about what strategies can be utilized to help us subsidize housing and to acquire some of these foreclosed commercial property?
The premier way that that's happening at this point, if it's adapted reuse, is through the low-income housing tax credit process. Right now, we're working through the process of identifying funding to subsidize that process, but also to do innovative new things, small-scale housing. There are a lot of different things that we need to take a look at. But as I understand it, the way that's happening these days, if it's adapted reuse for housing, for low-income housing, it's happening through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Project. I'm aware of one in Perry County, for instance, is an adapted reuse of a sewing factory, and they're looking to convert that into apartment units.
And how about...
Can I just say, I think for this purposes of this webinar, though, I think it's more about support services, and I'm not sure DHS and Ben can address the bank REO question.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit more of a PHFA.
Oh, okay. So when could we sit down with PHFA and you, Ben, and discuss how we can acquire some of these because I know that they're taking some schools and want to do some adaptive reuse by turning it into low, or I should say affordable unit housing and condos.
Well, my thinking with that is that you may either have contact with a local developer or maybe a nonprofit in your local area who has some interest in redeveloping that or developing in the first place. The PHFA probably won't sit down and discuss the redevelopment of specific properties in the abstract, like how do you do that, although they'll probably provide that technical assistance. What I'm thinking is that you may need somebody who's a champion of this, who's done this kind of work, to sit down and figure out what are the different funding opportunities. But that being said, I did mention during the webinar FAIR funding, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there is an opportunity to do innovative and unique things with that funding, and PHFA will be releasing a request for proposals in the coming months.
Okay, so they will send us an email and a link for that.
Yes, I will.
Oh, the Housing Alliance, I'm sure will publicize that.
Yep. I think it's going to be in October 17th, actually. So yeah, we can send that out. We are getting close to time. Thanks so much for the question and getting on. Do we have any additional follow-up questions?
That's it for me.
No additional follow-up questions, but I did want to just clarify the 30% thing. I just looked it up real quick. So if a person's income changes once they're in the apartment, their rent will be basically prorated based on their level of income. So if they eventually reach the 30% of the fair market rent, their income is able to afford that, then they're no longer receiving the subsidy. But up until that point, they will continue to receive the subsidy.
Okay.
So I just thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Again, thank you to our partners, Ben Loudermilk and Jonathan McVeigh at the Department of Human Services. We really appreciate it, and we hope everyone will come out and, well, we will send a date for the October webinar, and we hope folks will come and join us at the conference and hear Secretary Dallas speak at lunch. So thanks again to Ben and John.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.